All right, we're going to get right into it. Can you guys start off with a quick introduction about you, your firm, and what solution you're bringing to liquid staking?
For sure. Hey, so my name is Jess Solomon. I first got into the DeFi space back in 2017, where I began as the first community manager at MakerDAO. Since then, I've been working on a number of exciting projects, both in DeFi and now learning a bit more about staking. And currently, I'm helping with growth at Claystack. Claystack just launched DVT onto mainnet last week while we were in Singapore.
Congratulations. Evan?
Thank you.
Evan Weiss. I'm the head of business and policy at Alluvial. I've been working in the staking space about 5 years full time now. So I founded a trade association called Proof of Stake Alliance, which is kind of the leading trade association that focuses on staking regulatory and tax issues. And then I was the first business hire at a company called Bison Trails, where we built a staking as service platform, ended up being the largest staking service provider in the world, and now working at Alluvial after a few years at Coinbase.
Amazing. Mike?
I'm Mike Siligadze. I'm the founder and CEO of EtherFi. I got into crypto back in 2011, but didn't focus on it full time until EtherFi just about a year ago. What EtherFi is, it's a liquid staking protocol on Ethereum. The two things that differentiate EtherFi is that in our protocol, stakers get to control their own keys, so they have less custody risk as a result. And then our liquid staking token, which is coming out soon, is the only liquid staking protocol that is natively restaked. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about how awesome restaking is.
Okay, so to start, Robert Leshner had a somewhat spicy take last week, which I think was great, that the institutions aren't coming for our assets, they're coming for our tech. And I think it's a great insight, but I would caveat, except for Bitcoin and Ethereum. So as ETH gets de-risked, especially for institutions, and becomes more widely held, the next step is how to make it productive. The institutions aren't going to just accept being inflated away. So enter staking. Can we go down the line, or if one of you feels more passionate about it, what do you think are the one or two most important things that we need to build or prepare for institutions to be very active and large stakers in the space?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I'd say when it comes to institutions, much of it does come down to partnerships. And from the couple minutes that I chatted with Evan backstage, he has a sparkling personality. So I think that might help us out.
Yeah, so maybe I can just give a quick overview of kind of what Alluvial is building, which is the Liquid Collective. And so where our whole differentiators, we're really focused on kind of enterprise and institutional adoption. And so we see a couple key unlocks from our point of view, which is a compliance angle. And so with the Liquid Collective, anyone can sell, transfer, utilize LSTs, similar to USDC, but to mint or burn, you need to go through a centralized exchange or custodian. And so being able to tell a story of compliance, understanding what ETH has been deposited, who your counterparty is, it's a really important lock when we think about things like ETFs and ETPs, centralized exchanges, custodians. And so I think that piece is a really huge factor that I think is going to give more institutional focused token holders or service providers more confidence in the space. And the second piece is security. I think that's always top of mind. And when you think about security with liquid staking, there's really two pieces to that. It's the smart contract layer. And so are you doing regular audits? Do you have things like formal verification? Who are your auditors? Are they things that large companies are comfortable with? And then the second piece is your validator set. We saw this at Bison Trails. Security is top of mind. When institutions think about staking ETH or any other stakeable asset, they're not trying to kind of eke out basis points at this point. They're really focused on just earning their 4 or 5% and doing it in a really secure way that's avoids slashing. And so they're looking at validators that have things like double signing perfection, multi-region, multi-cloud deployments, and incredible security posture. And so I think those are kind of like two huge unlocks that we're focusing on that we think are going to be a major piece of bringing institutions into staking.
Yeah, so I'd certainly echo what everything Jessica and Evan said. The only thing I would add is ultimately it has to come down to actual utility. I think there's been a lot of talk about real-world assets, coming on chain. Ultimately, the income stream have to be external to crypto. if all crypto is this sort of solipsistic, gamble mechanism, staking yields are just going to continue to drop because staking yields, of course, are driven by transaction volume on the network, and ultimately that has to come from real utility. Even though we're a staking protocol, that's not necessarily the direction that we focus on. We recognize that has to be the ultimate source of value driving.
Mike, I also like your origin story of why you built EtherFi, and I think it's pertinent for when we think about institutions, what they're going to do with their ETH. You want to share that story?
Yeah, so we actually, when we first got into focusing on crypto full time, we started as a hedge fund, and one of the funds that we were operating was a staking fund. So we would take ETH, stake it, and create a really nice vehicle for investors to deploy into ETH into and get staking yield. As we evaluated the ecosystem of different options that were available for staking, we very quickly realized that there were some pretty serious custody risks, certainly with any of the DeFi protocols, specifically because as a staker, maybe you had access to your withdrawal credentials, but you didn't have access to your validator keys, which ultimately meant that you didn't actually have custody of your ETH because it could be withheld from you. So in evaluating that, we decided we needed to build a product that we ourselves wanted to use. And so that's what ultimately led us to building EtherFi. As we got deeper into the space, we realized how big an opportunity restaking was. And so we decided to make that a native component of our protocol.
And Evan, can you talk about, we saw, I think it was 2 weeks ago, some applications for an ETH ETF. What do you think the end game or process looks like for ETH as an ETF?
Yeah, it's, I think, an incredibly exciting development. So obviously we have spot ETF applications for Ether out there. A lot of these funds are already, or asset managers are already starting to look at how do I make sure that my investors get the additional 4 or 5% staking rewards or yield that comes with that. And so it's just not a competitive product eventually if you're not able to gain that 4 or 5% from now what is a deflationary asset. And so when you think about some of the complications that come from a staked ETF, though, there are significant liquidity issues. If I'm offering an ETF that has a T+1 redemption, the shortest amount of time it's going to take me to get my Ethereum back is about 5 days. And so there's just a mismatch there. And so I think we're going to see this is where LSTs are really going to start to come into play, is being able to facilitate those redemptions, earning those investors that additional 4 or 5%, and really making those staked Ethereum ETFs more accessible and more competitive. And so I think it's going to take some time, but I do see that as like the world, and I actually see for one of the biggest growth adoption points for LSTs.
I can't wait for the staked ETH ETF wars.
Right there with you.
Maybe one comment just about that. Everyone's so excited about the prospect of an ETH ETF, and I think there's lots to be excited about. The issue with a staked ETH ETF is if it leads to another, 10, 20, 30 million ETH staked, I mean, staking yields are going to come down. So more ETH being staked isn't necessarily a good thing. Even from a network security standpoint, in some ways, it can actually be risky.
Let's hope that adoption comes, though, and those execution fees can make up for it, though.
For more degens and maybe crypto native crowd, LSTs were a huge breakthrough because of the composability and usage that it enabled in DeFi. So as you guys are building out solutions, is it a big part of driving adoption for you, how you integrate, and how do you think about building out that liquidity for your tokens?
Yeah, totally. So I've worked on a number of different DeFi protocols in the past, including 1inch and Maker. For the most part, I'd say ClayStack's strategy is to continue to talk to our friends within the DeFi space and sort of develop solutions together. Of course, people like to be able to use tokens and have more composability, but they all have sort of interesting viewpoints of how we can all best optimize.
Yeah, I think you look at the DeFi plugins and you look at things like STETH, and there's a reason why it has a lot of escape velocity, because there's just so much liquidity and access points for DeFi applications, and things like Aave and Pendle are great ways for LSTs to gain TVL and adoption. I think we think about things a little bit different of how can we provide access points from centralized exchanges, custodians, being able to use LSTs as collateral. So a little bit of a different strategy, but I think it will be an important part of our play, similar to how you use USDC kind of anywhere in the DeFi economy as well.
Yeah, I mean, for us as a DeFi native protocol, integrations are pretty much table stakes. If you think about the most popular integrations or the way liquid staking tokens are used in the ecosystem, pretty much all of them amount to leverage. People do leveraged, staking yield, so they deposit their staked ETH as collateral, borrow ETH at a lower rate, redeposit it, and loop it, however many times. There's different mechanisms to get that leverage. So depending on the token, that's not the only way to do it. DeFi integrations, but yeah, at this point, it's pretty much table stakes.
Do you guys think the recent, I actually don't know if the vote went through yet, but the push by the Ethereum Foundation to slow I don't think they put a cap at the end, but to slow the staking queue is going to have an impact on really any liquid staking token's ability to increase liquidity?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's even some controversy because it was included kind of at the last second, and the staking queues have come down so much, so do you even really need it anymore? Yeah, I don't know that I know what impact it's really going to have. Given that the queues aren't that bad, I don't know that it's going to impact much.
Yet to be seen.
Yeah, and it is interesting to point out that actually post the Shanghai event, when people were able to withdraw, we actually saw an increase in the queue of people not necessarily wanting to withdraw, but wanting to stake.
Absolutely.
I think to Mike's point, though, if you look at things like the initial ETH2 release, the merge, and then the withdrawals upgrade, like you see that the demand for staking, the activation queue backing up, and as things start to kind of normalize, like now we're back to I think almost 10 days today, and it was 40 about a month and a half ago, and so it feels like there's kind of these pressure points where you see a ton of demand and then they kind of start to normalize. So to Mike's point, I don't really see it as a huge deal, honestly.
So the idea behind doing this was to have more time for research, and I think one of the things you want to research is if you reduce liquidity so much for ETH by having so much staked, there could be real issues. Does it change the liquidity staking like a journey if they say there is a cap on how much ETH can be staked? I guess it depends what the cap is.
Well, yeah, I would say that it certainly would. However, it's still interesting to consider the fact that really only 20% of ETH is being staked, versus other ecosystems like Solana, it's around 70%, Cosmos, 38, 40%, Polygon also around those numbers. So I'm not sure that the Ethereum Foundation is rushing to put a cap on the amount staked.
It's a divisible asset. I guess it doesn't make a huge difference. Okay, let's talk about tech a little bit. EtherFi was the first protocol to validate a block using validator with DVT. Congratulations. And ClayStack also recently launched on Ethereum with DVT. So Mike, starting with you, can you give a brief overview of what distributed validator technology is? And Jess, you can follow up with any thoughts as well.
Totally.
Yeah, so when you have a validator that is, attesting to blocks, building blocks, and so on, you have a validator key. And if you have that key that sits online on the server, you have the ability to attest to blocks, but you also have the ability to cause a slashing event. And if that validator goes offline, that the actual computer goes offline, then you're getting missed attestations when you're basically missing out on revenue. So DVT, distributed validator technology, basically takes that validator key, splits it into 3, 4, 10, however many pieces, and then it creates a cluster, basically, of computers that each has one shard, and then they kind of in unison, maybe like a 3 of 4 or 5 of 10 or whatever, attest to blocks and perform validating duties. So the benefit of that becomes almost impossible to get slashed because no one validator has the key. And if a bunch of servers go offline, you're okay because let's say it's a 3 of 4 or 5 of 10 or whatever. So that's the benefit of it. I think technically we were the first to validate a mainnet block using solo stakers. I think there were previous mainnet blocks proposed with DVT.
Can you, in the name of intellectual honesty, what are the trade-offs, the downside to using DVT?
There's some performance downsides to DVT. I don't know that anybody's gotten MEV working, which is a significant source of staking rewards. I think we're super close with that, but I don't know that anybody's officially gotten DVT MEV working on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so in simplest terms, the way I think of DVT is without DVT, we have one operator. With DVT, we have multiple operators. But within LSDs or LSTs, however you like to call it, ClayStack feels there's a bit of a trilemma between security, scalability, and decentralization. DVT certainly helps in terms of decentralization, but for the sake of intellectual honesty, what is potentially a trade-off? At this point, we'd say like scalability, but we want to build for the next decade. However, not all of the big guys out there are actually using DVT architecture or have put in the engineering effort to have it built out at this point.
Okay. Quickly, let's talk about maybe the hottest thing in staking is restaking. Mike, this is natively integrated into your product, but I'd like to get thoughts from all of you guys on how do you think it changes or impacts the liquid staking game? Start us off.
Is it worth doing like a 3-second thing on like what is restaking?
Yes, please.
Yeah. And I'll probably won't do a great job of this, but I'll try. The basic idea is, you stake 32 ETH to spin up a validator. And in exchange for that, you're getting some staking rewards. What if you could use that staked ETH as effectively collateral to go and supply security to other services that run on top of Ethereum? This could be Oracle networks, this could be data availability layers, it could be other blockchains. So you're in effect kind of overloading the staked ETH with other services that run on top of it. There's lots of risk and controversy about this. Lots of people think it's a terrible idea and will bring down Ethereum, but there's also lots of upsides and opportunity that come out of it.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've seen in like the development of the staking space is when you still want to launch your own, L2 or your own blockchain, like you'd have to go and say, hey, Mr. Validator, come work with us, Mr. Staking Provider, and bootstrap all these different validators together. And then you'd have to find an inflation curve to be able to compensate them for that. Now with restaking, you're able to kind of get the value of that without having to kind of bootstrap your own validator set. And that seems like a major innovation. But to Mike's point, there is kind of, risks there that I think are yet explored, and I think that's why things like EigenLayer are kind of taking a slower approach with capping the amount of LSTs there. And from our point of view, we're not building restaking, but we want to plug into restaking protocols as an LST, so users can take their LST, whether it's on a centralized exchange or custodian, easily plug it into EigenLayer and help secure these other protocols that are being built on top of it.
Love it.
Yeah, for the most part, I agree with these guys. At initial glance, it seems like a great idea, I think especially to users. However, at the same time, users take on a lot of risk. And to be completely honest, like myself being a user of many things, they don't always understand exactly how the protocols that they're using technically work. And therefore, I would just advise that people be more cautious and consider what they're actually using.
Novel technologies.
Yeah.
All right, great. Well, to wrap up, guys, how can people reach you, and who are you hoping reaches out, or what kind of people are you hoping to meet?
That's a great question. Well, you can come say hi to me here, or you can buy me a drink at one of the events that doesn't have an open bar. But yeah, I'd love for people to send me an email, jessicasolomon@gmail.com, and tell me their ideas about LSD.
You can find me on Twitter at evvoice1. And if you're interested in staking from an exchange custodian, liquid staking, regulatory policy around staking, love to chat and find ways to work together.
Yeah, I would just say come stake some ETH, ether.fi. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys.
Awesome, thank you.